Adding and subtracting negative numbers. In this lesson, we are going to discuss adding and subtracting negative numbers. We'll start by using number lines to visualize problems, and then I'll show you a trick for solving more difficult problems. Lastly, we'll finish up the lesson by going over something called double negatives. The first question you may have is, what is a negative number? Well, it's simply the opposite of a positive number. To show you what I mean, let's take a look at a number line. As you can see, 0 is in the middle, and any number to the right of 0 is greater than 0. These numbers are all positive numbers. On the other hand, any number to the left of 0 is less than 0, and therefore a negative number. You also may hear people refer to a negative number, such as -4, as the opposite of 4. -4 and the opposite of 4 mean exactly the same thing. They are both referring to the number that is 4 steps to the left of 0. Okay, now that we've talked about negative numbers, let's solve some problems using them. Let's start with the problem 5 minus 9. To solve this problem, let's use a number line. The 5 tells us where to start, so let's go there. The sign, plus or minus, tells us whether to move up or down the number line. Since we have minus, we're going to move down the number line towards smaller numbers. And the 9 tells us how far to move. In this example, we start at 5 and move 9 steps down the number line. Where do we end up? At -4. So 5 minus 9 equals -4. Notice that 5 of the 9 steps were used getting from 5 to 0, and the remaining 4 were used going from 0 to -4. Okay, let's try another problem. How about 3 minus 4? Again, we start at 3 and go 4 steps down the number line. Where do we end up? At -1. So 3 minus 4 equals -1. All right, let's do 2 more problems using number lines. For the first problem, let's solve -6 minus 2. This problem looks a little harder since we have -6 out in front, but it's not a big deal. As in the previous examples, the -6 tells us where to start, so let's go there. Since we are subtracting 2 from -6, we go 2 steps down the number line to get to -8. So -6 minus 2 equals -8. For the last problem, let's solve -7 plus 4. Again, the first number, -7, tells us where to start, so let's go there. Next, we move 4 steps to the right, that is, up the number line, because we are adding 4 to -7, and arrive at -3. Therefore, -7 plus 4 equals -3. Okay, great. So why don't we use number lines to solve every problem that involves negative numbers? Well, I think we can both agree that number lines are great for small numbers, but what about when the numbers get bigger? For instance, what if we were asked to solve the problem 100 minus 114? Clearly, we need a better way to solve this problem, because no one wants to sit around and draw a number line that's over 100 numbers long. So here's a better way to solve the problem. All we need to do is rewrite it as an addition problem. Now, if you're thinking, wait a minute, you can't just change subtraction to addition, that doesn't make any sense, then you're right. But what we can do is rewrite the problem as adding the opposite. Let me show you what I mean. 5 minus 9 is a subtraction problem, so let's rewrite it as 5 plus -9. -6 minus 3 is a subtraction problem, so let's rewrite it as -6 plus -3. Finally, 3 minus 4 minus 5 is a longer subtraction problem, but the same idea applies. So let's rewrite it as 3 plus -4 plus -5. So why does this make things easier? Because now we can apply one of just 2 rules. Here's the first rule. If the sign of the numbers is the same, add the numbers and take their sign. Let's take a look at the previous 3 problems to see if we can find an example of when we would use this rule. The first problem is 5 plus -9. Here we see that 5 and -9 have different signs. 5 is positive and -9 is negative, so the rule doesn't apply. How about -6 plus -3? Are the signs of -6 and -3 the same? Sure, they're both negative. So our first rule applies. Remember, our first rule says that if the sign of the numbers is the same, add the numbers and take their sign. So we add 6 plus 3 to get 9, and then we take their sign, which is negative, to get -9. What if we were given the problem -7 minus 3? Again, we have a subtraction problem, so let's start by rewriting it as an addition problem to get -7 plus -3. The sign of the numbers is the same, so what do? We just add them up and take their sign. 7 plus 3 equals 10, and since both numbers are negative, the answer is -10. Not bad, right? Okay, now what if the signs of the two numbers are different? To answer this question, we need to go on to the second rule. The second rule says that if the signs of the two numbers are different, ignore their signs and subtract the smaller number from the larger number, then take the sign of the larger number. Again, let's look at the examples I gave earlier. Do any of the examples have numbers with different signs? Well, in the problem 5 plus -9, the signs are different, right? 5 is positive and -9 is negative. So let's apply the rule. We look at 5 and 9 and see that 9 is larger. So we subtract 5 from 9 to get 4. Now we take the sign of the larger number, 9, which is negative, to get an answer of -4. Let's try another problem. How about we revisit 100 minus 114? Our first step is to rewrite the subtraction problem as an addition problem to get 100 plus -114. We see that the signs of the numbers are different. 100 is positive, and -114 is negative. So we apply the second rule, and since 114 is larger than 100, we subtract 114 minus 100 to get 14, and then we take the sign of -114 to get -14. Okay, let's solve two more problems together, and then I'll ask you to try some on your own. Here's the first problem. Find the value of -523 plus 759. Now, this may look tough, but let's stick to what we've learned and give it a go. We have a negative number, so let's apply one of our two rules. The signs of -523 and 759 are different, so we use the second rule and subtract 523 from 759 to get 236. 759 is positive, so our answer should also be positive. Therefore, we know that -523 plus 759 equals 236. Hopefully you agree that using our trick made that problem much easier to solve. Now, before we get to the last problem, let's summarize what we've done so far. We rewrote subtraction as adding the opposite, and then we applied one of two rules. Rule number 1, if the sign of the numbers is the same, add the numbers and take their sign. Rule number 2, if the signs of the numbers are different, ignore their signs and subtract the smaller number from the larger number, then take the sign of the larger number. Okay, on to our last problem. 3 minus 4 minus 5. First, let's rewrite subtraction as adding the opposite, to get 3 plus -4 plus -5. Now, the only difference between this problem and the others is that we have 3 rather than 2 things being added together. As an aside, you may recall that these things are called addends. In this case, the addends are 3, -4, and -5. To solve a problem with 3 addends, we simply read from left to right and solve as we go. The first problem we come to is 3 plus -4. The signs of 3 and -4 are different, so we subtract the smaller number, 3, from the larger number, 4, to get 1. Now we take the sign of -4 to get -1. So we are left with -1 plus -5. The signs are the same, so what do? We add the numbers and take their sign. 1 plus 5 equals 6, and their sign is negative, so we get -6. And now we have our answer. 3 minus 4 minus 5 equals -6. Nice work. Hopefully you're getting the hang of using our two rules. I think it's important to mention that you don't have to use our trick on every problem. You should only use it when you find it helpful. Alright, I find that one of the best ways to learn math is by doing it. So before finishing up this section of the lesson, how about trying some problems on your own? Welcome back. So far we have covered 2 of the 3 topics that I wanted to discuss in this lesson. We went over using number lines to visualize problems, and then I showed you a trick for solving more difficult problems. Now let's finish up by discussing our final topic, double negatives. To do this, we'll tackle 2 last problems that might appear to be difficult, but as you'll soon see, they only look that way. Here's the first problem, 3 minus negative 5. As I said, this problem may look tough, but here's a trick that will make it an easy one. Whenever you see subtraction followed by a negative sign, that is, 2 negative signs in a row, simply change them into addition. So to solve this problem, we just rewrite 3 minus negative 5 as 3 plus 5. We can do this because, as we discussed earlier in the lesson, we can rewrite subtraction as adding the opposite. Therefore, when we subtract negative 5, we are simply adding the opposite of negative 5. And the opposite of negative 5 is positive 5. And now that we have rewritten 3 minus negative 5 as 3 plus 5, it's easy to see that the answer to this problem is 8. Alright, last problem of the lesson. Negative 4 minus negative 5. We have another double negative since we have subtraction followed by a negative sign. So let's change the 2 negative signs into addition to get negative 4 plus 5. The signs of negative 4 and 5 are different, so we subtract 4 from 5 to get 1, and then take the sign of 5, which is positive, to get positive 1 as our answer. So negative 4 minus negative 5 equals 1. Okay, that finishes up our discussion of adding and subtracting negative numbers. In this lesson, we used number lines to visualize some problems, and then we went over a trick for solving problems with negative numbers. Lastly, we polished off the lesson by discussing double negatives. In the next lesson, we'll go over multiplying and dividing negative numbers. Before calling it a day, though, how about trying a few more problems on your own? Remember, if you need a hint or explanation, just click the hint or explanation buttons. Also, you can always come back later and listen to this lesson again if you need a quick review. Good luck!